They were the internet's golden couple, an unstoppable force that captured the world's attention with their black love, luxury, and the kind of loyalty that everyone envied. The extravagant photos, the flawless relationship, the million-dollar home, all painted a picture of perfection. But what if the reality behind the glitter was far darker? One night, in the very house built on trust, a twisted betrayal would unfold, a betrayal so cold, it would shatter everything they had built. What started as a lavish gift of love would turn into a deadly deception, and the man who gave her everything, including his last breath, would never see the light of another day. How did it all go so wrong? Stay tuned, as we dive into a story of passion, lies, and a murder that no one saw coming. Before we unravel the shocking details of this case, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because you won't want to miss what comes next. At just 46, Rashaad Merriweather had already built a name for himself as a real estate mogul in Savannah, Georgia. His empire, crafted from nothing, had turned him into one of the most talked about men in the South. From flipping dilapidated properties into state-of-the-art homes to mentoring young entrepreneurs, Rashaad's success story was the epitome of the American dream. He'd grown up in the gritty, forgotten corners of Savannah, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. But Rashaad had always known he was destined for more. With every house he bought, every building he renovated, he stacked brick upon brick, not just for wealth, but for the chance to prove to the world, and to himself, that a man could rise from the ashes. His Instagram was a reflection of that journey: lavish cars, tailored suits, Bible verses splashed across golden sunsets. The Blueprint King, he called himself, inspiring thousands of followers who saw him as the blueprint for what hard work and faith could accomplish. And then came Shontelle. At 27, she was everything Rashaad hadn't expected, and yet exactly what he thought he needed. Curvy, mysterious, and stunning in a way that left people guessing, she was a stark contrast to the world he lived in: private, elusive, and with no digital footprint to speak of. While Rashaad's life was an open book, Shontelle's life was an encrypted secret, hidden behind the walls of her private Instagram account. But there was something magnetic about her, something that drew Rashaad in with the force of a hurricane. It wasn't just her beauty, but the calm way she spoke, the way she moved, like she held all the answers to the questions he hadn't even thought to ask. He couldn't explain it, but within weeks, she was featured in his posts, her soft smile appearing next to his. "God finally sent me peace," he wrote under a photo of them on a romantic getaway to Turks and Caicos, a place so exotic it could only be described as paradise. It was clear to anyone watching. Rashaad had found the one, and he wasn't shy about sharing it with the world. To his followers, they were the couple everyone wanted to be. The ones who turned every moment into an Instagram-worthy memory. Coordinated outfits, elegant dinners in the city's best restaurants, romantic getaways that looked like scenes from a movie. Their every move seemed scripted in perfection. Their wedding was the stuff of dreams, broadcast live to over 300,000 viewers, the ceremony an extravagant affair where money was no object. $250,000 was spent on the venue, the decorations, the gowns, and the music. The ring he slid onto her finger was worth $80,000, a glittering symbol of his devotion. And the house, the one he gifted to her, was the crown jewel of their new life together. A $1.4 million estate in the heart of Savannah, deeded solely in Shontelle's name, as a declaration of love and trust. It was a testament to his devotion, a reflection of everything he had worked for. To the outside world, Rashaad and Shontelle were the embodiment of black excellence, a couple that had it all: love, wealth, beauty, and power. They were the Merriweathers, Savannah's most watched couple, and they knew it. The world couldn't get enough of them. But little did anyone know, behind the perfect photos and extravagant gifts, cracks were already starting to form, invisible to those who only saw the gloss of their lives through the lens of social media. What Rashaad didn't know was that Shontelle had a past she had spent years burying beneath layers of makeup, perfectly styled hair, and soft-spoken words. While she appeared to be the picture of grace and elegance, there was a side to her that she kept hidden from the world, including Rashaad. Shontelle had grown up in the foster system of Atlanta, bounced from one broken home to another, never knowing stability or real love. She had dropped out of college in her sophomore year, struggling to make ends meet, her dreams slipping further away as she hustled for survival. Dating wealthy older men became her way out, a means to secure the kind of life she had always dreamed of, one that didn't involve scraping by or worrying about bills. One of those men had been Taryn Mullick Whitmore. Taryn, fresh off a 6-year sentence for armed robbery, was a man shaped by the streets, dangerous and unpredictable in ways that sent shivers down anyone's spine who dared to cross him. But Taryn's hold over Shontelle was undeniable. It wasn't love, it was control, manipulation, and fear. Despite his time behind bars, despite everything, he still had Shontelle wrapped around his finger. And that wasn't by accident. In the shadows, Taryn and Shontelle had made a plan, one so carefully constructed that Rashaad never saw it coming. It started with Shontelle's perfect image, the flawless woman who appeared to be everything he had ever wanted. He was in love, swept up by her beauty and quiet charm, never questioning what lay beneath the surface. But Shontelle had a different agenda, and Rashaad was only a stepping stone in her game. The plan was simple: marry Rashaad, earn his trust, secure the house, the life insurance, and then eliminate him. Shontelle's loyalty to Rashaad was an illusion, a well-crafted facade. The real loyalty was to Taryn, and she was playing Rashaad like a pawn. In text messages later recovered, Shontelle's words to Taryn were chilling in their clarity. "He trust me 100%. We gon' eat, I promise," she wrote, the cold assurance in her words a stark contrast to the sweet voice that had once lulled Rashaad into a false sense of security. The plan was set in motion, and everything seemed perfect. They were going to get what they wanted, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Rashaad was blissfully unaware. He was in love, convinced that Shontelle was everything he had ever dreamed of. His sister, Donisha, wasn't so sure. She had always been skeptical of Shontelle, and with every passing day, her doubts grew. "That girl don't talk about her family. Don't talk about God. She only talks about things," Donisha warned her brother, a voice of reason in a world that had become clouded by Rashaad's infatuation. But he waved it off. To him, Shontelle was perfect, everything he needed and more. Her beauty, her charm, the way she made him feel as if everything he had worked for was finally worth it. She was the prize he had fought for, the love he thought he deserved. What Rashaad couldn't see, though, was the darkness lurking behind Shontelle's smile. The perfect life they were building together was just a facade, and beneath it all was a betrayal so deep, it would unravel everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and loyalty. On the night of October 15, 2023, the plan that Shontelle and Taryn had meticulously crafted for months was about to unfold. The evening began innocently enough. Shontelle prepared Rashaad's favorite meal, his preferred steak with a side of garlic mashed potatoes and sautéed asparagus. The table was set with care, candles flickering softly in the dim light, the warmth of their home wrapping them both in an illusion of comfort. But behind the smile on Shontelle's face was a cold, calculated purpose. Rashaad was in high spirits, oblivious to the danger that lurked. As he savored the meal, Shontelle quietly slipped crushed Xanax into his glass of Hennessy, watching as the liquid stirred, masking the drug's presence. Within minutes, Rashaad began to feel drowsy, the edges of his consciousness dulling as the alcohol and the sedative worked in tandem. He wasn't fully aware of what was happening, his thoughts growing sluggish, his body heavier with each passing minute. But this was what Shontelle had planned: he needed to be vulnerable, disoriented, and unaware of the storm about to hit him. Once Rashaad's eyes grew heavy and his movements slowed, Shontelle sent a simple text message to Taryn: "He out. Come through." Taryn didn't hesitate. He knew the plan well, and within moments, he was inside the house. The two of them, the seemingly devoted wife and the ex-convict who had never fully let go of his hold on her, moved quickly. What followed was a brutal frenzy that no one could have ever imagined from the couple that had appeared so perfect on the surface. Prosecutors later said that Rashaad was stabbed 28 times, the majority of the blows landing in his chest and abdomen. He never stood a chance. The attack was swift, shocking, and violent, an explosion of rage and desperation. In his final moments, Rashaad was engulfed in confusion, struggling to make sense of the betrayal that was happening to him. His vision blurred, his breath shallow, and the pain of his wounds ripped through him. But in the haze of the blood and terror, he couldn't understand why this was happening. He trusted her. He trusted Shontelle with everything. And now she was taking it all away from him. A neighbor, hearing muffled screams from the house, assumed the couple was simply being intimate, the sounds no different from any other night. No one suspected that the man who had been the symbol of black excellence in Savannah was fighting for his life, his blood spilling across the bathroom floor. When the life left Rashaad's body, Shontelle and Taryn didn't panic. Instead, they went into damage control. They poured bleach over his lifeless body in the jacuzzi, the chemicals mingling with the blood in an attempt to erase all traces of their crime. Shontelle then took Rashaad's phone and texted his assistant, pretending to be Rashaad himself. "I'm off-grid for the next couple of days," the message read. It was a carefully constructed lie, one that bought them the time they needed to cover their tracks. For the next 2 days, Shontelle and Taryn stayed in the house, as if nothing had happened. They ordered food, ate meals at the table where Rashaad had sat just days before, and laughed together in the very home that would now be forever stained with blood. They moved through the house with an eerie calm, as if the murder of Rashaad had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience, a necessary step in their scheme. They even took selfies in the closet, selfies in the living room, smiling and carefree as if they were living out the dream they had so carefully planned. One image later surfaced, a chilling snapshot of Shontelle wearing Rashaad's expensive watch, her face glowing with a twisted sense of triumph. She captioned the photo, "Finally mine." It was a bold statement, an affirmation that she had succeeded. She had gotten what she wanted, Rashaad was gone, and the life he had built was now hers to take. But in the stillness of the house, the truth was starting to creep through the cracks. They had gotten away with it for now, but their happiness would not last. The darkness they had unleashed would eventually catch up to them, and the life they had stolen would crumble under the weight of their deception. It wasn't until 3 days had passed without a word from Rashaad that his family began to worry. Danisha, his older sister, tried reaching him multiple times, but the calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. Panic began to set in. She knew something wasn't right. Rashaad was never one to disappear, especially not without a word. His absence was an anomaly, and in the tight-knit world they had built, it was a red flag no one could ignore. Desperate for answers, Danisha enlisted the help of her cousin Jamal, and together they decided to use a spare key to let themselves into Rashaad's mansion. They arrived late in the afternoon, the sky heavy with the impending weight of the situation. As they stepped inside the foyer, the house felt eerily silent, too silent. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally as they moved toward the stairs. And then, before they even reached the top, it hit them, the unmistakable scent of decay. It was the type of smell that crawls up your spine and refuses to let go. The odor was overpowering, like bleach and rot, an ominous warning that something was terribly wrong. Danisha's heart sank, her instincts already screaming at her as she turned the corner toward the master bathroom. What they saw when they entered was beyond any nightmare. The sight of her brother's lifeless body, bloated and stained with bleach, seared into her mind in an instant. He was slumped in the jacuzzi, his blood mingling with the harsh chemicals that had been poured over him in a feeble attempt to erase the evidence. His once handsome face was barely recognizable, twisted in death in a way that no one could have prepared for. The strength drained from Danisha's legs as she collapsed against the doorframe, the sight of her brother's final moments haunting her every step. Jamal, too, stood frozen, his hands shaking as he reached for his phone to call 911. The cold reality settled over them like a heavy blanket, Rashaad was dead. But who could have done this? And why? The house that had once been a symbol of success and happiness was now the scene of unspeakable horror. Meanwhile, Shontelle was already miles away from Savannah, desperate to escape the consequences of her actions. She had planned everything with precision, but now that the reality of what she had done was setting in, panic pushed her into motion. She fled to Birmingham, Alabama, a new identity in hand. Using a fake ID under the name Nia Caldwell, Shontelle attempted to erase herself from the life she had built with Rashaad. The money she carried, $11,000 in cash, was a small fraction of the wealth she had just secured, but it was enough to get her to the next step. She was determined to disappear. 2 wigs, a bus ticket to Mexico, and a few carefully packed belongings were all she needed. She was going to start over. The life she had taken wasn't hers to keep anymore, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the police would come looking for her. But her escape was short-lived. At a bus terminal in Birmingham, Shontelle was arrested. The officers found her sitting in a crowded waiting area, her eyes darting nervously, her hand clutching the small duffel bag that contained her cash and wigs. She was caught in the act, her attempt at fleeing falling apart the moment the police found her in the terminal. In her panic, she had miscalculated, believing she could vanish into thin air, but instead, she was now in the custody of the authorities. Taryn, too, was running. He was no stranger to hiding, and when the heat came down, he did what he knew best, he went underground. For days, he evaded capture, his whereabouts unknown as he moved through the streets, desperate not to be found. It wasn't until days later that he was discovered, hiding in an attic in East Point, Georgia. The moment of his capture was a quiet one. The police had him cornered, and there was no escape this time. Taryn had nowhere left to run. The aftermath of the murder began to unfold with a chilling precision. As Shontelle and Taryn were both caught, the questions only multiplied. How could someone who seemed so perfect, so devoted, turn so violently against the person who had trusted them with everything? And what did this mean for the people who had loved Rashaad? The answers would come slowly, but one thing was certain, the lives of everyone involved would never be the same. The news of Rashaad's murder spread like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of reactions across social media. His followers, once captivated by the love story he had so carefully curated, were left shattered and in disbelief. The shocking betrayal cut deep. The images of the seemingly perfect couple now felt like a cruel joke. Not him. He built her a palace and she turned it into a grave, one devastated follower tweeted, their words echoing the sentiment of thousands. People couldn't fathom how someone who had been shown so much love could be betrayed in such a brutal, cold-blooded way. Rashaad's fans turned their grief into outrage, questioning everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and trust. On the other hand, Shontelle's social media presence remained disturbingly untouched. While the world grieved, she continued to post with a chilling nonchalance. Designer clothes, lavish trips, and captions dripping with irony such as, "Blessed," painted a portrait of someone who hadn't just gotten away with murder but was relishing in her victory. Her confidence, her smirks, her apparent satisfaction with the spoils of Rashaad's death sent a clear message to everyone watching, she didn't care. To her followers, it was as though nothing had happened at all. The stark contrast between the woman in those posts and the woman who had planned her husband's murder only deepened the sense of horror. What kind of person was this? How could someone so calm, so composed, betray the man who had given her everything? Then, investigators released chilling evidence from the investigation, voice messages and text exchanges between Shontelle and Taryn that painted a horrifying picture of premeditated malice. One voice note in particular sent a shiver through everyone who heard it, "Soon as we sign them papers, it's over. He don't even see it coming." Her words were cold, calculating, the voice of someone who had already decided that Rashaad's life wasn't worth keeping. She had planned every step, as if his death were just another obstacle in her path, and she was going to make sure it happened, no matter the cost. The texts between the two were equally chilling. They read like blueprints of a murder, a plan put into motion with sinister precision. Shontelle's cold, methodical messages painted a picture of a woman who had seen Rashaad as nothing more than a means to an end. Her role as a wife wasn't about love, it was about securing the life she wanted, and when it no longer served her, she discarded him like an old toy. Her scheming was as deliberate as it was ruthless, and the evidence was damning. As the case unraveled, the debate over who was to blame began to intensify. Some placed the blame squarely on Rashaad, accusing him of being too trusting, too naive. They pointed to his lavish gifts, his openness, his willingness to give Shontelle everything, without ever questioning her true intentions. He was blinded by love, one commenter wrote. How could he not see it coming? Others, however, were unwavering in their belief that Shontelle was the true predator. She had taken advantage of his kindness, using his love to manipulate him into a situation where his life had no value to her. To them, she was nothing more than a con artist, a woman who had plotted her way into Rashaad's life with one goal in mind, his death. And then there was the small, but vocal minority, who shifted some of the blame to the system that had allowed someone like Taryn to manipulate Shontelle in the first place. Meant in a toxic relationship with someone like Taryn had made her susceptible to manipulation. They saw her as a victim, trapped in a cycle of abuse and control. But even this argument was met with harsh criticism, with many pointing out that it didn't excuse the cold-blooded murder of Rashaad. But as the media frenzy continued, one thing became clear to everyone who followed the case: this was a calculated murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Shontelle's role in Rashaad's death wasn't some spur-of-the-moment crime of passion. It was a deliberate, thought-out decision that had been years in the making. She wasn't a woman driven by love or lust, she was a woman driven by greed and ambition, willing to do anything to secure the life she had dreamed of. And in the end, it was Rashaad who paid the ultimate price for her twisted desires. The public's reactions were split, but one thing was unanimous: this was no random act of violence. This was murder. And it was cold. The trial was a spectacle. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, every eye fixed on the two defendants who had once seemed untouchable. Shontelle, with her cold demeanor, sat motionless, a woman who had once been the epitome of elegance and grace. But now, she was nothing more than a defendant, guilty in the eyes of the law. Her stone-cold expression never faltered, never betrayed any remorse for the life she had taken. She didn't even flinch when the prosecution labeled her a modern-day Black Widow, a woman who had lured a man in with promises of love only to brutally end his life for financial gain. Every word seemed to reinforce the chilling reality of who she had become. Meanwhile, Taryn, who had once been a shadow in Shontelle's life, tried to play a different card. He attempted to paint himself as a mere pawn in the game she had orchestrated. He tried to distance himself from the cold, calculated murder, but the evidence was undeniable. His fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, the knife that had torn through Rashaad's flesh, and on the bleach bottles used to cover up the crime. There was no escaping the truth, no way to shift the blame. The jury listened intently, weighing every detail, every piece of evidence, knowing that a man's life had been stolen, and that two lives now hung in the balance. The deliberations were agonizingly long, 6 hours of uncertainty and mounting tension. Would justice be served? Would Shontelle and Taryn be held accountable for the horrors they had inflicted on Rashaad and his family? When the jury finally returned with their verdict, the answer was clear. Both Shontelle and Taryn were found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and wire fraud. The courtroom erupted into a mixture of relief, disbelief, and sorrow as the judge delivered the sentences. Shontelle was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, her fate sealed in a prison cell for the rest of her days. Taryn, whose involvement was equally damning, was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 40 years. It was a sentence that would give him a sliver of hope for release, but for Rashaad's family, it would never be enough. In the aftermath of the trial, Rashaad's family struggled to find a sense of closure. The pain of his death, of the betrayal by the woman he had loved, was a wound that would never fully heal. But they decided to honor him in the only way they could, by creating a foundation in his name. The Rashaad Merriweather Foundation was born out of tragedy, its mission to support young black entrepreneurs, offering mentorship and resources to those who, like Rashaad, had dreams of building a legacy of success. It also served as a cautionary tale, warning others about the dangers of manipulative relationships, the kind that could strip away everything and leave only destruction in their wake. But even as the family worked to turn their grief into something positive, the house that had once symbolized their dreams lay abandoned, a ghost of the life they had hoped for. The grand mansion Rashaad had given so much to, $1.4 million, countless hours of effort, now stood vacant. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the house, with some claiming they could hear faint weeping at night, as if the walls themselves mourned the man who had been lost within them. The house had become a monument to Rashaad's tragedy, a place where memories had once flourished but now stood as a grim reminder of betrayal and murder. Yet, the world continued to move on. Shontelle and Taryn's names became synonymous with treachery, their stories forever etched in the annals of crime. But for Rashaad's family and the people who had once looked up to him, his legacy endured, not in the house that had once been his, but in the lives he had touched and the dreams he had inspired. Despite the darkness that surrounded his death, his spirit lived on through the work of the foundation, a testament to the man he had been and the good he had sought to create in the world. This wasn't just a murder. It was betrayal at its most chilling, a man's love weaponized against him. Rashaad gave Shontelle the world. He built her a palace, trusted her with his dreams, and made her the center of his universe. But in return, she gave him death. What began as a love story full of lavish gifts, grand gestures, and an idyllic public image ended in a tub of blood and bleach, the walls of their perfect home now echoing with the haunting truth of what lay beneath the surface. What drives someone to destroy the very person who gave them everything? Was it the lust for money and power, or something darker, a cold emptiness that can't be filled by anything, even love? Could Rashaad have seen the red flags sooner, or was he so blinded by the fantasy of love that he missed the danger right in front of him? These are the questions that linger long after the trial has ended, a reminder that sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who can hurt us the deepest. If this story disturbed you, like and subscribe for more cases where passion turns poisonous and the people we love become the ones we should fear most.